Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome your host, Kerrigan.
Welcome to Witch Talk. My name is Kerrigan. I'm here with another episode of Witch Talk. This time I have a very special guest. He is also, we just found out, Portuguese like me, and we just talk a lot off the record. And it's absolutely fascinating when you just feel that that there is someone from your country, and he's a fascinating man and an amazing author. And we're going to talk about his book, The Legacy of the Gods. He has so many books, and one coming out also. So we're going to have a lot to talk about, sacred sites and all of the good things and interesting things that go with it. So before we go anywhere else, I just wanted to tell you that you can contact us on Witch Talk by going into our Facebook page. You know that, and basically that's it. So I'm going to introduce him, and here we go. Freddy Silva is one of the world's leading researchers of sacred sites, ancient systems of knowledge, and the interaction between temples and consciousness. He is the best-selling author of Secrets in the Fields, The Science and Mysticism of Crop Cycles, a critically acclaimed work published in 4 languages, providing the only thorough appraisal on this much misunderstood phenomena. His new book is Commonwealth, The Origin of Sacred Sites and the Rebirth of Ancient Wisdom. He has also directed several documentaries, including Stairways to Heaven, The Practical Magic of Sacred Space, Temple Making, and In the Footsteps of Isis. He has been lecturing internationally for over a decade, with keynote appearances at the International Science and Consciousness Conference, the International Society for the Study of Subtle Energies and Energy Medicine, and the Association for Research and Enlightenment, in addition to appearances on the Discovery Channel, BBC, and radio shows such as Coast to Coast. Described by the CEO of Universal Light Expo as perhaps the best metaphysical speaker in the world right now, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome my guest today on Witch Talk, Freddy Silva. Welcome to Witch Talk, Freddy. How are you?
Oh, pretty good, Kerrigan. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for coming, and thank you for accepting this invitation. Now, we were talking. I guess that this was the first time that I actually was talking backstage. We can say backstage, off the mic, and we could just continue. I mean, we can just open the mic and kind of continue the conversation, because it was fascinating and it was very, very interesting. Now, tell me one thing, Freddy. You're from Portugal. You were born in Portugal, and when did you become interested in all of this? In all of the sacred sites and spaces and archaeology and history and all of this?
Oh, I think I was really weird by the time I was 3, and I was drawing pyramids.
Oh, you too? Okay.
Yes. And I ought to apologize for my English accent, even though I'm Portuguese and living in America. It's I travel a lot. But no, I mean, in Portugal we have, as you know, a very rich history, which goes back thousands and thousands of years. We have sacred sites which seem to predate a lot of places in Europe, which few people know about. And then when I moved to Britain, and I lived around Stonehenge and Avebury, which need no further introduction, it just sort of, it stayed with me. There's something about these places that just stays with you and opens you up, and I think if you are of a certain mind, and you connect with these places, they seem to read you like a credit card. They open you up, and they dump lots of information into you. And it just sort of stayed with me for my whole life. And then, you grow up, you develop other interests, and you realize you have to earn a living. And you go off in different tangents, and inevitably there's a sort of itch you just can't scratch. It's always behind you, and that's what happened. I just sort of reached the point in my life where I wasn't satisfied making a lot of money, and I wanted to make a change. I wanted to be able to leave the earth at some point and say that I actually helped move things along by a few percentage points in the right direction. And the more experiences I kept having of a spiritual nature, which has nothing to do with religion, in these places, the more I recognized that these places really are alive. And I really just sort of went out and began to walk them and read about them, measure them, get totally, just drink the knowledge of the site, and slowly the information starts coming back. And, what I got in return was this fabulous story about why these places were built, who built them, and how far back they go. But more importantly, what it is that they're doing there and what they're doing to you and for you. And that's where the fun really begins.
Now, you wrote this wonderful book, Legacy of the Gods, The Origin of Sacred Sites and the Rebirth of Ancient Wisdom. I should tell everyone in the chat room and who are listening and seeing us that this is a book that it's from it's amazing. I mean, it's a really amazing book. And when I saw it, it automatically said, I want this guy in the show right away. And then I wrote to you and you said, well, I'm really not an occultist. I don't know what you're looking for, because I'm really not an occultist. And then I opened the book and I read the book and I said, well, I don't know about that. Because you have such a consciousness about what a sacred site is, and you have a fantastic experience that I'm hoping that you will share with us in the pyramids. That it's absolutely amazing. Oh yes, that one. Oh, everybody said,
one of many.
That one. Yes,
one of many.
It's absolutely amazing. And when I read it, I thought, he says that he's not an occultist. What? So there is this consciousness of space that I think, and I was a professional actor in Lisbon for many years. Actually, my degree from Portugal is from the Escola Superior de Teatro e Cinema, which is basically the theater school and cinema school in Portugal,
I know it well.
In Lisbon. Yeah, and I was a professional actor in Lisbon for many years, and I'm used to sacred space, because for us, the stage is a sacred space every single night, and it's really something that it's really almost like spiritual. When it comes to that, there are certain things that you don't say. When you enter with respect. I mean, it would be the same thing that you would do in a church or in any other sacred space that you would go into.
Totally.
So this is fascinating for me, and
you're talking about the origins of going back to
absolutely.
Greek times, yes. When of course the Greeks used to design their stages in a certain way with a certain geometry in mind, and of course we now know today that putting people in specifically geometrically shaped rooms will do some very strange things to you, mostly to do with healing. Absolutely. And also states of consciousness. And of course, they also design them to have a certain reverberating effect, so the sound would be calibrated depending on how many people were in the audience and or who weren't. So yes, I mean that comes from that particular art of sacral connection between the audience and the person doing the acting.
And it's truly a spiritual experience, to tell you the truth. I mean, if you are sensible to it, and most actors are. I mean, they might not know what it is, but they do what they do because there's something special about it. And it's certainly not just the acting. There's something else.
Oh, absolutely.
that pulls
it's like
you
a
in.
channeling.
Absolutely, yes. There is this kind of thing, and it's I always thought that when you really are a good actor, and some of the actors that I've worked with and know, and some of the stories that I've heard, is that some of the things, at some point on the acting, you don't remember what you're saying. I mean, you're saying it and you're doing it, but there's a certain point that you don't really remember. And if you are really embedded into it, I mean, you remember when you go in and you remember when you go out, but you don't remember the middle. So I always thought that this would be almost, in some cases, obviously I'm not generalizing, but in some cases a type of possession, sort of.
It's very similar.
A kind of a touching it's very interesting.
I mean, usually when I go on and do lectures, and I do a lot of lectures, it's the same thing. It's like I'm just channeling something, and I have things prepared, and I just basically wake up 2 hours later and people are clapping, or I hope they are. And you just don't realize where you've been. I think your passion sort of takes you over, and I think sacred space is almost like that as well.
Absolutely,
I mean, if you go there with the right intent, magic does happen, but this is why skeptics don't believe this, because they go there with the intent of, well, show me. Well, these places don't show you anything. They don't have a responsibility to you or me. They are a halfway house where they are built according to certain geometric dimensions, certain acoustic environments, strategic use of stone, electromagnetics. All of these things are proven. And when you put those things in one place and you enter it with the right intent, the place does open up to you. And then, of course, you go into this sort of near trance-like shamanic state where, I always tell people to be careful what they ask for in these places, because you might just get it, which then, takes us back to all these experiences that people have in sacred spaces where you see things popping out of the walls, or you download information which suddenly reveals a major revelation, which then goes on to be provable. And that's one of the reasons that I find these places so fascinating, that they are there to accentuate your physical body and extend your soul to its natural progression, which of course is the entire universe. And they built these places for the specific reason that we tend to forget this. We tend to be so concentrated on the physical world that we forget that all around us there's this huge universe that we're so intimately connected with. And we tend to forget it because of all our troubles. Someone stole my girlfriend, someone hit my car, I've got bills to pay. All this stuff to get you ground into the physical world. And yet, when you go to these places, you're, for a few minutes, allowed to escape. And you basically connect with this astral reference library that allows you to bring back extra bits of information, that allows you to live your life totally aware. And the ancients had a very good way of describing this initiation, which was the process of rising from the dead, which has nothing to do with bringing dead people back to life, and all to do with the initiate who wants to no longer totally associate with the physical world. They want to connect with a much higher self, and they basically go through this initiation process, which is pretty much what the sarcophagus in the Great Pyramid of Giza is all about. And you basically go through this rite, and when you come back, hopefully back in your own body, you do suddenly become very much aware that there is a bigger world around you, and from that moment on, you are so alive and so aware of subtleties that you develop a certain degree of control over the world around you. So you have total self-empowerment, and of course, this is a huge threat to the church in the old days, which is why they tried to get rid of all of these people. So there you have it. That's one of the reasons why millions of people were killed for this information. Burnt alive.
Yeah. Now, I have a theory. I don't know if you agree with it. There is this very deep problem that we have, especially people that are, related to the occult or spirituality or, something more than, Christianity or Catholic Church or whatever it is. So there is a lot of information that was lost. We know that. I mean, with the burning of the Library of Alexandria and all of those things. I mean, there are things that we don't really know because they were actually lost. So we think. I think, and this is my question for you, but I think that these sacred places can, in a way or another, because people are looking for manuscripts and people are looking for hidden, things, and that's fine. That will complement everything. But I do think that the knowledge can be accessed through the places themselves, through going into the place. You know what I mean? So I do think that the lost information can be recovered. by unlocking the place, and not by going into this manuscript or that manuscript. And I think that they knew this. This is the reason why they actually built it, so that we can. It's a cell phone line, It's a telephone. It's kind of a, it's a recorder, So you can't just go there and then you can just unleash this knowledge. Do you think that this is true?
I think it is, and it was done in a threefold way. First of all, if you look at the original Egyptian text, they quite clearly talk about the problems with language, written language, and that for this very reason it was much more important to convey things orally and also through sound. In fact, the Egyptians were notorious for creating puns because they reckoned that people took language so seriously that they made fun of language. So one of the ways that you were initiated into the mysteries was through oral indication. This is why you'd spend 10 years memorizing this stuff, so then you could know it by heart and then teach somebody else. So unfortunately, that meant that as we start approaching the years of organized religion, these people are being killed because of they are the temple, they are carrying the information. So they encoded some of this information into texts and scrolls, which part of which the Templars discovered under Jerusalem, and that's now highly provable. And also the third part to the equation was that and I find this actually almost a sick joke, that when all of these sects were going through Europe and the rise of the Catholic Church is obviously paramount, they realized that they can't really keep fighting the forces of the Vatican and some of the despotic kings like Philip IV of France. So they came up with a brilliant plan, which was to literally encode the information into the very fabric of the buildings of the people who are going to kill them. And we know these as the Gothic Cathedrals. Just as an example, because the Gothic cathedrals are just like an Egyptian pyramid, just like Stonehenge, and so forth, because they literally are built on exactly the same principles. And if you know what you're looking for, if you have a certain understanding of the mysteries, you can read the building like a big stone book. And the symbols are everywhere, the dimensions are everywhere. If you can unlock the secrets of the geometry, the way the relationship of pillars, altars, and towers are built according to each other, you can unlock those secrets. You can look at the bosses on the ceiling. It's full of information. And, of course, the people in the church didn't know any of this. So, yes, there is that method that you can go into the buildings, look very carefully, and you can actually start picking up the information. And, of course, the fourth element would be that you actually sit in the place called the altar. And there's a reason why it's called the altar. And even about 100 years ago in Britain, it was still spelt with an E, telling you that it's a place of alteration. And in all the places in Europe, which are built on top of original ancient Neolithic sacred sites, the altar is exactly where the original mound or stone circle used to be. And nowadays we can measure the energy of these places and find that they are highly sensitive to geomagnetism, which of course has a profound effect on your state of awareness. So if you go there in a certain state of mind, and you do your preparations and you enter with humility and quietness of mind, and you're able to sit on these points, yes, if you ask the right questions and you put yourself in a state of meditation, you will get back information, and it will be as visions, it will be as actual words sometimes. Sometimes it will be coincidences that bump into your life as you're walking around. There are many different ways that these things work. But these places are libraries set in stone, and depending on your method, they will open up to you the information that's encoded into them in one way or the other.
Mm-hmm. Now, we know that a triangle is the simplest form there is. I mean, there are other forms, but the triangle seems to be a recurrent one. Circle is another one that we know that it's recurrent and very old, and all of those are very old. Now, you seem to find the triangle and the three very important in this book that he wrote, The Legacy of the Gods, not only because it connects points, 3 points, but also because it finds the middle of those 3 points. And how important is this for us to understand?
Oh, it's huge.
Yeah.
The whole concept of temple building was based on the law of correspondence. What I mean by that is that our ancestors, basically because they weren't encumbered with things like cell phones and YouTube and all of this, they basically had the time just to look around, and they looked at nature, they observed, and they dissected and distilled, and they came to the conclusion, and which is very, very simple, but it took them thousands of years to understand this, was that when you look at the orbits of the planets and the way that nature works around you, it is perfect. And the world of the gods was associated with this perfection. And so they reasoned that if you took something that corresponded to these natural laws and you built them in certain places on the earth, what they used to call the primordial mounds or the navels of the earth, where ironically there also are geomagnetic hotspots, then you, by the law of correspondence, by applying the correct geometry to each of these sites, you will elicit a certain life force within that specific spot which relates to the geometry. So, for example, the pentagram, very misused symbol, the symbol of the divine feminine and of life. It turns out that the pentagram is also found as the basic geometry of the DNA of the human body, and this is why we react to it so favorably. And so if you actually go and sit yourself on one of these spots and look at the geometry and work it out, you become actually susceptible to the geometry, to the effects of that geometry. So the triangle is essentially the Trinity. It's the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. It's the Mother, Father, Child. The two elements that conceive a third. It's the most potent symbol that there is in the entire universe, to the point where our construction industry today still builds its buildings, puts its roofs up. If you look very closely at the roof of your house, it'll always be made with triangles because it's a real shape that holds the most amount of energy together. So by the law of correspondence, the ancestors figured that if you locate their temples on the land according to invisible triangles, you are basically inhibiting the actual energy, imbuing the energy of the triangle into those sites. So it makes them 3 times more powerful than what they are. And what I was thinking about this when I was writing Legacy, and suddenly, decided to think, well, let's see if this is true on the land, because now we have something very addictive and very accurate called Google Earth. And I have millions of little pins stuck on it, or sacred spaces everywhere. And after a while, you start to unlock this, and you think, okay, the trick is to find sacred sites which have a common point. Either they were built at the same time, they were built for the same reason, or there has to be some shared commonality. You can't just put 3 pins wherever you want and make them connect. That would be cheating. And I began to look at connections, and yes, they actually did, all around the world, build sacred sites in threes, and they all share the same mythology, the same age, the same purpose. The rest was just, pure luck, connecting these sites together. And I found again and again on every single continent that these power spots are all linked by either equilateral triangles or isosceles triangles. They literally are aligned at 90 degrees to each other. And that is an extraordinary thing when you consider that, some of these sites cover over 2,000 miles between them, and two, the Earth is round. You cannot actually see them from the ground. So how on earth did they figure this out? And one of the biggest ones that I found, and again, just by adopting the same logic and not making things up, was to look at mythologies to do with the dove, especially in terms of communication. And we have a couple of temples in Egypt, one in Greece, and also, of course, the story of Noah's Ark. And the actual Ark itself has now been found. That you can actually see a picture of it online on Google Earth. And there's actually magnetometer surveys done of the site to show that the timber of the actual ship is still there. It's a huge vessel on the side of Mount Ararat, exactly as the Bible says. So when you link these sites, 3 sites together, which are all to do, their connections are basically to do with transformation. They're all called navels of the earth. They're all to do with a group of sages called the Enlightened Seven, the 7 Sages. So you have these points of commonality. You link these 3 together, and they form a perfect equilateral triangle. Mm-hmm. Now you bisect this triangle, which basically leads you to a tiny little dot on the south of the island of Cyprus, in the middle of the Mediterranean. And it lands exactly in the center of this cube-shaped tower built by the Knights Templar, who built it on an original sacred site. Mm-hmm. Now, the chances of that happening by accident are incredible, totally incredible, especially as I didn't even know that this was even there to begin with. And again, it goes back to the idea of linking these sites, almost like we do with satellites these days on the ground, where you link satellites and dishes across different states in order to create a great big radio telescope to communicate with the stars. And they did exactly the same thing. They would empower the geometry of the triangle to each of these sites, and that's what makes them so powerful even today.
Now, another thing that I wanted to ask you is it's about your experience in the pyramids, which was absolutely. I mean, when I read it, I thought that it was incredible and a true initiation, as you just mentioned before. Can you tell us a little bit about that firsthand? Because I know that it's one of many experiences that you had.
Yes, and I used to be an atheist, so that certainly is one of the times when I got converted to God very quickly. It's an extraordinary experience, even when I read it today, and it stayed with me for the rest of my life because I wasn't expecting it and I wasn't asking for it, which is even more fun. And I have witnesses to prove it, which is even greater fun.
Yes.
And essentially, I mean, we went to the pyramid with a group. I work with a group who quietly goes about the business of clearing up sacred sites where people go there and do silly things with them, or things they should be doing with them. And we just sort of, do the usual ceremonial procedures to bring in light to these places and, basically put them back in a state of balance. And then we just leave them as they are and move on. And we don't really advertise this fact. It's something we do because it pleases us and we feel like we're doing something for the greater good. And one of the things that we did was to go with a group to the Great Pyramid. And we had we were not able to get private time on this trip. And anyone that's been to the Great Pyramid just knows that it's absolutely impossible to have the place quiet or to yourself at any given moment. And sure enough, we got there, and only 6 people were able to actually go in out of the whole group of about 20 people. So they're obviously quite disappointed. And there was 4 of us guys, and there was 2 women. And the whole place, all the way up and down the Grand Gallery, was full of screaming children. And you can only, you drop a pin in this place, and the whole building reverberates with sound. So even the tiniest noise can be deafening. So we're in this very cramped environment. It's very damp in there, extremely hot. And we get up to the top into the king's chamber, and suddenly everybody vacated the building. And the 2 women that were with us also didn't quite like the vibe in there, so they left. And that's fine because these sites aren't for everybody. But oddly enough, they quite enjoyed being in the pyramid next door, which, as we found out later, the pyramid next to the Great Pyramid is for the feminine energy, whereas the Great Pyramid is for the masculine energy. So that worked quite well. So there's 4 of us guys in there. 2 of them sort of new to this. 2 of us have been doing this for quite a long time. And we thought, well, since we have the place to ourselves, let's just take the opportunity to actually do a little bit of work quietly and just do a bit of toning and see where we go. Well, they looked at me and I thought, okay, I'll do a bit of toning. And at that moment, all the lights went out in the building. And I thought, wow, what are the chances of having the place to yourself and getting the lights turned off as well? This is really amazing. So we did a bit of toning. And to this very day, I cannot understand the notes that were coming out of my throat because I've never been able to do anything before or since. It's as if someone just was playing this musical instrument through my body, and it felt so good. And everybody else joined in, and this sound was moving around and around and around the chamber in total darkness. And I opened my eyes, and I saw the most incredible thing, which was basically about 30 very, very tall, skinny people draped in what I can only describe as the most beautiful satin in white, just literally emerged in a circle out of the walls of the Great Pyramid. And I felt absolutely no fear whatsoever. I mean, I wasn't asking for this. I didn't even know this was even possible. And they just surrounded us, and they sort of, you couldn't see their faces. The cloth was draped over their heads, and they sort of nodded. I could even see them now. They're just sort of nodding, and I nodded back in appreciation. And suddenly I'm realizing that I'm seeing this in total darkness, and I can't even see the other 3 guys. And we kept toning and toning and toning. I thought, this is the most wonderful, loving feeling. I could do this forever. And then we sort of felt that it was about the right time to stop making sound, and each of us took turns to go into the sarcophagus, which really wasn't designed at all to bury anyone in it, if anybody's done the research. The frequency in the sarcophagus actually allies to the same frequency where your body starts having an out-of-body experience. It's deliberately designed to do that. So we didn't know this at the time either. Now, 4 of us took turns to go into the sarcophagus while the 3 of us kept making a little bit of sound. And you have to understand that these 4 people, they ranged in height from about 5'4" to me, who is 6'5". Mm-hmm. And each of us went in there, and I remember going into the sarcophagus and thinking, I hope I can fit into this. And it was exactly the width of my shoulders, and perfectly the length of my body, where the bottom of my feet perfectly touched the bottom of the sarcophagus, and the flat of my head touched the top. And I thought, when I go home, I want to be able to actually know this, so I can make a bed exactly to this size. And I just made a sort of a joking, conscious comment about that. So the lights came back on, and then I heard this very annoyed Arabic person at the bottom of the pyramid shouting, and he wasn't happy about something. So I thought, I think we've overstayed our welcome. So we went outside, and it's quite clear that we were something had happened. All of us wanted to say something, and no one wanted to say it. And I just said to one of the guys, I said, "Did you see what I saw?" And he said, "You mean all of those people that came out of the stones dressed in white? They're about 15 feet tall." I said, "You saw that?" He said, "Absolutely. You saw that too?" And we just basically our mouths were dragging along the dirt at that point. So we're totally in this completely altered state of disbelief of what we just experienced. Our body was just vibrating all over. It was so good. And we got back to the rest of the group, one of whom is possibly one of the world's greatest trance channelers. I mean, even the military go and knock on her door for information. She's that good. And she was jokingly saying that the group was tuning in to us in the Great Chamber. And she said, "Well, wasn't that a great experience?" And we hadn't told her anything, by the way. And she just said, "Wasn't that a great experience? You honored the building, and the Guardians came out and honored you. Did you like that?" And I said, "So it wasn't imagined?" She said, "Of course not. This is how it works." And then I just said to her, "What about the thing with the sarcophagus?" And that's all I said. And she said, "Well, when you are doing the right work and you go into these buildings, the rock becomes liquid stone, and it molds itself to you. The temple and you become one and indivisible." And that's when the other guy said, "But you know what? When I went into the sarcophagus, it was exactly my width and my length." And we thought, that's not possible. There's over 1.5 feet of difference between each of us. And that's when you realize that you're in magic, and the place really does become a living organism, exactly as the Egyptians always said.
Absolutely. Now, I was intrigued by the identity of these guardians, and who are they, and who were they, and all of that, as you were. Also, I'm sure.
Totally.
We know that they were guardians, but we don't really know where they come from. And then you write on your book that there was a journalist in the early 20th century that actually talked to them. Right.
Absolutely, and that was what I found even more startling, and this is what I love about my research, is that I'd had this book for years in my library, and I never got around to picking it. And I was in the middle of writing Legacy, and suddenly I thought, wait a minute, I think someone else also went to Egypt. I wonder if he had an experience in the pyramid. And I just read through his book. Fantastic writer. I mean, he gave up his life in the Victorian era because he was also disillusioned with life, and he wanted to go walk about, find out what is the biggest secret of life. And of course, he went into the Great Pyramid at a time when he could spend a night there by himself. And he saw exactly the same people we saw, and he even addressed them and also described them in exactly the same way. I could not believe this was happening. And of course, because he had so much more time, he had the whole evening there, he was actually taken around secret chambers, was told that the whole building is hollow, and they'll said, well, we're never going to reveal this to anybody because humanity just hasn't, they're not just, it's not that they did not develop, it's just that they've lost the plot, and until they get the plot back, we will only reveal this to people who will honor this tradition. And so, of course, he gets taken around these chambers, he talks to them at length, and then, before he realizes it, boom, he's back in his body. And so, to all intents and purposes, it was the same experience that we had had, and it validated it so much, but it also validated it for so many more people that have had these incredible experiences, and they thought they were totally mad. But, when you put it like that on paper, and you can validate it, then obviously you give credence to so many people that have had these shamanic experiences, but that were never able to vocalize it.
It's amazing. It's really amazing. It's an amazing experience. I can't even imagine how wonderful that was for you and for the people who were present. And we just can't imagine Paul experience on it. Now, Stonehenge is another place that you were, you lived in England for quite a while, and so it's very interesting to know, and the stories behind, to talk to the guards about what they see around Stonehenge and what they don't see. Sometimes they don't see it. So how strange? I mean, what were you surprised when when they told the stories that they told you about Stonehenge? And we're talking about the guards that guard the site, right? Yes.
Exactly. Back in the early days, and I'm talking about in the early 90s and before that, before the Official Secrets Act and crop circles were around, it was very easy to talk to the guards. I mean, these are people who are ex-SAS troops. They're crack troops who basically go around deposing governments, infiltrating enemy lines without being noticed, and then they basically retire quietly. And in order to get away from their wives in the evening, they basically take up these night jobs of guarding these sacred sites. So you'd expect to get nothing of anything sacred from them, except for, derisory remarks or another cynical comments. But, these are some of the most spiritual people I've ever met, and they're very grounded people. And when I first started to write the first book on the crop circles, when of course we get so many of the world's crop circles around there, and I can tell everyone that they are not made by people, believe me, and there's a whole book to prove that. And part of what I was doing there was not just learning about the crop circles, but also about how people, actually got involved with sacred space and Stonehenge. And so after we did a certain meditation, in fact, one of my first experiences of really connecting with the invisible universe was at Stonehenge, where I went there with one of my guides, I guess, and she basically went in there to get her messages, as I called it. And she told me just to sit down and pick a stone and, see if I could see anything. And I thought, what the hell is she talking about? Back then I was a complete idiot. And of course, I sat down next to one of these rocks, which looked like it just sort of pointed at me and said, come over and talk to me. And you can actually hear these things. And I thought, that's really weird. I can't believe I'm hearing these things. And, I just sort of sat next to this rock, and before I knew it, 2 hours just disappeared, and I can feel the guard behind me saying, in your own time, just make your way back. And it's been 2 hours now. And I just closed my eyes. Where did I go? And, I just got downloaded so much information that I ended up writing half a book on it. But afterwards, we had a chance to talk to them, and I said, so what's it like here at night? I mean, it must be very peaceful. And I said, well, it's far from that. You will not believe the things that we get to see around here. I mean, we've been sort of doing all kinds of military things we can't tell you about, and to be able to have the honor of being in this site, it changes your life, because we've seen entire Roman legions marching across these fields, and you can only see them from the knees up. And you think, well, that is actually quite interesting, because back in the Roman era, 2,000 years ago, the level of the soil would have been another 1.5 feet further down. And yes, the imprint of energy of the Roman army would have been exactly at that height. And strange things do happen in that part of the world, where they even receive unusual communications back from the 1920s that have been trapped in time that suddenly get picked up on field radios. The whole area around Stonehenge is an extraordinary electromagnetic recording machine. And they talk about people who actually sort of vanish into the stones dressed in period costume. They triangulate the site. They know where people would hide, and they can't find them. They just go into the rocks as if they're portals made of jelly, and they disappear into another world. There are those times when they talk about the site being enveloped in this very thick mist, which is not unusual around there. But what is unusual is that when they cross the perimeter of the stones, they look up and they can see stars, and they walk back out and they see fog. It's as if the whole thing is just a big tube of energy inside the actual stones. And then there are those funny stories where they talk about the young cadets that come in the evenings, and they talk about, I'm going to come here for a few evenings and make some extra pocket money. And they say that after their first apparition of strangely looking people of very tall stature disappearing into the rocks, these cadets jump over these 15-foot fences, literally, get into their cars. They don't even come back for their paychecks,
Oh, my God.
And they do this with such great humor. It's so wonderful.
Yes, it's great. Now, I know that you studied Stonehenge, and I know that it's you lived there. You had the opportunity to go there more than once. What is your intake on why was it constructed, and what was the purpose of it?
Oh, it's a huge story, and it comes in multiple layers as well. It is all the things that people have talked about, because the purpose of a sacred space is literally to be multi-dimensional and multi-layered. And the Egyptians left us these instructions, basically telling us that a site can never be considered truly sacred unless it is built on many, many layers of understanding. It is the ultimate systems language. And until you start unraveling it, you have no idea the depth of to which it goes. And yes, it is an astronomical marker. It does align itself to the equinoxes and the solstices. We know this. It's also the world's most perfectly calibrated calendar. It is the only one of its kind in the world that calibrates perfectly, without losing a beat, the motions of the solar movement and also the lunar movements. And the two are very, very different. And the stones and the holes around them, the stones do calibrate both calendars. They are also filled with sacred geometry. Every facet of sacred geometry is held within the stones, including the holes around them. And more importantly, it's a site that goes back not just to 3000 BC. It's now been validated going back to 8000 BC. And this is where the mysteries of Egypt now come in very handy, because one of the things that one of the legacy that was given to us in a lot of these writings, whether it's in Egypt or in Easter Island or in Central America or even southern India, where the Tamil culture comes from, they all talk about a time when there was a big flood, and it destroyed and overwhelmed the mansions of the gods. And the survivors, who were called the builder gods, came back in arcs. Sounds familiar to most Christian people. These builder gods came back in groups of 7, and it was their charge to rebuild the former world of the gods by basically building the primordial mounds and then going promulgating the knowledge by going walkabout across the face of the earth and building the mounds that would serve as the future temples as an insurance policy for humanity. And I always wondered if they got as far as Britain. Because the original name for Stonehenge is actually Ambrisbury, and its origins come from Egypt. It means the enclosure of obelisks. And we have enough descriptions of these builder gods who were very tall. They had strange elongated heads, and most of them are actually buried in giants' graves throughout the British Isles. I used to live right next to one of them. I've even seen the bones. I have the photograph of the actual skeleton of one of these people in the book. So they're not a figment of the imagination. And I often wondered if these people of enormous stature actually got as far as Britain to actually encode this new mansion of the gods at this site. Because when you actually triangulate the site of Stonehenge with one of the major power points of the Egyptians, which is, of course, Heliopolis in Egypt, and, of course, the top of the Earth, which is the North Pole, you triangulate that, and it gives you exactly 33 degrees, which, of course, brings us to the 33rd degree of Freemasonry and the 33rd paths of the Kabbalistic tree of life. So all of these things that we take for granted today are encoded originally in the original placement of temples. So, yes, it's part of a major, major way that they used to put the temples on the face of the earth, and that's why one of the reasons why Stonehenge is so important, is because it's so many facets that it's encoded within that site.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Now, you talk on your book about, and you begin this in chapter 10, the 7 principles of sacred space. Can you guide us through those? Very shortly,
yeah,
if it is possible.
in a very short. Yeah, that's why I put it into a DVD to sort of make make it easier. I was very much aware that and again, just reading my experience and also the reading of what the texts, the surviving texts that have been left to us have been saying, and that is that these places are built as an insurance policy first and foremost, because they recognized way into the future that we, as a humanity, would lose the plot. We would stop losing our connection with the natural world, and it would lead us into all kinds of problems. And of course, we're seeing them right now, which is ironic because we're now beginning to feel the need to go back to the land and go back to these sacred spaces, and the attendance is going up. So we do, even if we don't understand it, subconsciously we are getting the message. So I suddenly got to the idea that, sometimes people cannot afford, or they cannot go to these sacred spaces, even though they're all over the world. They're right here in America, everywhere. And it would be nice to be able to recreate these temples wherever you live. And I began to look at these temples as living organisms, that whenever you apply the principles that are found in Stonehenge or the pyramids or even a simple stone circle, if you could actually recreate that in your backyard using the same techniques and without having to resort to huge rocks, and if you could actually measure the effects, then you're onto something. And I tried this out several occasions, and I found that I could actually recreate a portal of energy in my backyard. I even found my neighbors actually wandering in the middle of the night, standing on these hot spots, wondering why they were doing this. And I thought, I'm onto something here. And it was my way of actually bringing the temple into people who can't actually go and experience these places. And my purpose was to literally build 1 million new portals around the world, because when you do this, when you build these temples on the 7 principles of sacred space, and virtually every temple in the world is built exactly on the same principles, you begin to open up a sort of a portal of connectivity to other levels of reality. And then you really got to be careful what you ask for, because you might get it, because it begins to amplify the temple who you are. So if you go in there with a certain intent and you are very honest about it, the temple and the energy that's generated by these principles begins to double and triple and quadruple this manifestation process. It's the same thing that you find, for example, in The Secret, the phenomenon that came out several years ago.
Yes.
Except there are certain limitations of what you can and can't do, and this goes way beyond The Secret, because it's actually a very methodical way of doing it. And I'm surprised that the people that actually wrote that did actually pull this in, because it's so obvious. So basically, the 7 principles was literally to recreate this a temple in your living room, in your deck. Sometimes you don't even see it. It can be extremely subtle. You don't need massive rocks to do it. But the effects are quite profound. And in some of the workshops that I've conducted to teach this over the course of a day, at the end, after we've put in the geometry and the energy, we've moved energy lines, water veins, and what's forth, I actually get everybody to open up the sight of one thing, and I actually watch people falling over from the hit of energy that comes out from one of these things, and it's actually quite funny. And I tell people that it's a sign of disclaimer if they get hurt, if they fall on the floor. And when you go in, I mean, these people are totally mesmerized, even when you're doing this in the middle of a hotel, in a conference room. They do tell the difference between the outside space, what they used to call profane space, and when they go in, they can tell the difference with sacred space, and you can see that they definitely are being influenced by that perimeter of that space, and that's why I did this. So I either put it into the book or I put it into the DVD temple making, just to make sure that people got the message. But still, that's no excuse why you should never travel to these places, because they will open you up. And then, of course, just be prepared for the consequences, because you become very raw. But if you're prepared to accept that you are, a god, as even people like Jesus said, you are a god, then obviously you suddenly will be aware of the power that resides within you and how you can harness that power to be a totally self-creative human being.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Now, we don't have much time. It's almost finished. I had a lot of things to ask you, but...
I told you.
I know. But I just want to go through some of your books. You have another one which is called Secrets in the Field, the Science and Mysticism of Crop Circles, and where you talk extensively about this, and you actually mentioned that earlier, that these are actually not done by humans at all. I mean, they can,
not at all.
Right? They can.
They
not.
They have tried, but they can't replicate them.
No.
Visually, they have now been able to replicate them because they're basically paying the farmers off, but also because they had 15 years of practice, but they can't replicate the effects. And no matter how many documentaries are paid for by skeptics on television, and there's a lot of them, including National Geographic, they basically are falsifying the information and leading people astray. And it's deliberate. There is a deliberate attempt to mislead people, because this is the crop circles are possibly the most profound phenomenon happening around us today, and that's why.
Yeah. Now, you do have, I found two editions of this, or 2 covers. I think that Is one of them? One of them is like with the green kind of cover, and then the other one is very much like in the same wave of the Legacy of the Gods. I mean, it's a beautiful kind of goldish, circle. So are these two editions, or is this one a DVD, or what is the?
It's the same edition. The publisher just figured that they would try and sell more books by pretending that there's a different book. Which I actually prefer the green cover myself.
Yes.
It's the same book essentially. For the same reason that if people go on my website, they'll see that the book is actually the Legacy of the Gods is actually called Commonwealth. Because I originally publish a vanity press where it's printed on really, really good quality paper, which cost me a fortune. But it hits the table with a big thump, whereas the reprint version of Legacy of the Gods, it's thinner and, in my opinion, not quite as beautiful. And beauty is everything. So,
that's the deal with that. So I must say that this is Red Will Weiser, publisher. It's actually Ampton Road Publishing Company, but it's Red Will Weiser, and we thank them very much for their generosity on letting us read these fantastic books and have wonderful guests like Fred here, and really experience these firsthand. It's absolutely amazing. Now you do have a DVD. The Location of Paradise, and
a whole bunch of them.
You do have a lot of them. I'm just showing the covers of them. The Temple Making, it's another one, and it's just fantastic. Now, what can we expect from these DVDs? What will you go? I mean, it's
There's one called Stairways to Heaven, which complements Secrets in the Fields, and it really is a documentary shot in Britain with a lot of the sacred sites and also showing how crop circles really are made. And it's quite an old documentary, but it's still beautiful in the way it's put together in the information. So those two go together. And then we have Temple Making, which is a freestanding book based on the 7 principles of sacred space, which teaches you step by step how to build your own temple wherever you live. And again, it's a good way to sort of get an introduction to how to move energy around and to create your own portal of possibility without having to travel anywhere. And then you have, there's one on Orbs, I believe, which is my lecture on linking orbs, the phenomenon of orbs, to crop circles and sacred spaces. And you'd be amazed that the common point to all of these is to do with magnetism and magnetic hotspots, which I had no idea. And then I have one which actually says nothing. It's a beautiful trip through the temples of Egypt, done to the music of Stephen Halpern, just showing, it's just a chill DVD. You get to go to Egypt for free. And then there's...
Well, it says a lot, Freddy. It says a lot. You say, actually it doesn't say something.
And then there's one which is my presentation, which is, or my recent presentation, which is the Location of Paradise, which is based on some of the things in Legacy of the Gods. And it's basically me doing 2 hours in a lecture, but I've also designed it more as a documentary to make it more visually interesting. And hopefully, if I finish the next book on the Knights Templar, I hope you'll be able to produce another DVD, which will be about this importance of sound in sacred spaces, and that will also be quite interesting.
Absolutely, and we do know that that's really, really important. Now, let me just point people to your website, which is InvisibleTemple, right? .com.
That's
is
right.
It .com? Yes.
InvisibleTemple.com.
Yeah. So beautiful photographs. Now, I think you are a photographer also, right?
I am indeed. Yes.
Yes.
And there's an there is all of that is on FreddySilva.com.
So we're kind of reading this book, right? And it's fascinating. And then you go to your website, and suddenly there's this beautiful photographs, and he's a photographer also. What? So it's this whole thing, and it's beautiful. It's just the photographs are absolutely amazing. And I know that you travel a lot, so it's you have that possibility, which is absolutely amazing. Keep photographing, please. We do want
will
more
do.
photographs.
It means I can write off my trips abroad.
Absolutely. Now, tell me one thing. Your next book about the Templars. When is it coming out? Is it Red Real Wiser or is it another publisher?
I'm going big.
Ooh, all right.
I'm literally editing it right now. It should be sort of complete for reading by my editor in about a week, and then a couple more months after that as the process goes. And it will get printed in a short run on my Vanity Press, so it'll be on my website. So if anybody comes on my website and gives me their email, I'll let them know when it's ready.
Okay.
And in the meantime, I'll be looking for an agent, possibly in New York, to look for a big publisher who can take this worldwide in a big way, because it's the most important thing the Templars ever accomplished has never been written about, and I'm astonished and also heartfelt to realize that it's to do with our shared country of Portugal. And the reason why it's never been written about is possibly because no one was paying any attention to this little insignificant country of which so much can be said. So I'm very proud of it. It's going to be a unique take on the Templars.
Absolutely.
So hopefully it'll do really well, and hopefully I can retire after this.
Oh, absolutely. Can we have you back on that one? Because we would love
Absolutely.
to know a little bit more about it and to discuss
Absolutely.
The Templars. And that we have the places in common, so it would be very interesting to have you and have a conversation with you about that book. It would be great.
Oh, absolutely. I love how these connections occur.
Yes, I know. So, welcome. Thank you very much. Welcome. Thank you very much for being here, Freddy, and
Thank you for having
to be
me.
so generous about these stories and to really share these wonderful experiences with us. Don't go anywhere. You
pleasure.
know that I wanted to talk to you in a little bit. Okay, I'm just going to close the
Okay.
show and then we'll talk a little bit. Okay. Thank you again for
Sure.
being on Ridge Talk. Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you. So that's it. This is the end of the show today. Next week we'll be back for more with another wonderful author. Until then, have a wonderful, wonderful week.